My sister called from the departure gate and laughed. "We dumped Grandma on your porch. She's your burden now." She didn't realize Grandma was on speakerphone right beside me. Grandma didn't cry. She just calmly pulled out her checkbook and said, "Drive me to my estate lawyer before their flight touches down." The pen didn't shake in Grandma's hand. Mine did, and I was the one who'd spent 11 years learning to keep my voice level for other people's teenagers in crisis. Grandma signed her name on the intake sheet in tidy, unhurried cursive, Eleanor R. Marsh, while I stood behind her in a law office lobby that smelled like burnt coffee and new carpet, trying to remember how to breathe normally. 40 minutes earlier, my sister had been laughing into a phone at gate C14, 3,000 miles away, not knowing her grandmother could hear every word of it. Grandma hadn't laughed. She'd looked at me, calm as a woman ordering lunch, and said, "Get your keys, Dana." I didn't argue. You don't argue with your grandmother when her voice goes that quiet and that even. What I didn't know yet, what I wouldn't understand until the whole afternoon had come and gone, was that Grandma hadn't reacted to anything. She'd executed whatever she was about to do to my sister and Grant. She'd clearly been getting ready to do it for a very long time, and the phone call from the departure gate hadn't started it. It had just been the excuse she'd been waiting for. I didn't understand how long a very long time actually meant until 3 months later, sitting across a conference table from a retired judge, watching my grandmother read my sister a timeline that went back further than any of us had known to look. But that's getting ahead of things. I'd been the reliable one for 4 years, ever since Mom's heart gave out at 58 and Dad quietly folded himself into a condo in Scottsdale and started calling on birthdays and nothing else. Somebody had to be the person Grandma called when her Honda wouldn't start, or when the dentist's office needed a ride scheduled around her blood thinners, or when the smoke detector started chirping at 2 in the morning and she didn't trust herself on the step stool anymore. That somebody had always been me. Whitney worked in marketing for a hospitality brand and was on a plane more months than not. Grant sold himself as too valuable at the wealth management firm downtown to be reachable during business hours, and somehow that logic extended to weekends too. I had 2 kids, a job as a guidance counselor at the middle school, and a laminated card in my glove box with Grandma's medication list on it, updated every few months in my own handwriting. I didn't resent it exactly, not out loud. Grandma's house on Renfield Lane still smelled like the same brand of dish soap it had when I was 7, and she still kept a chip blue mug on the second shelf that had been my grandfather's. And every time I stopped by, she had marigolds dying in the same clay pot on the porch rail because she refused to admit she couldn't garden the way she used to. Her little terrier Pepper still lost his mind at the mail truck every single day like it was new information. She was sharp, sharper than most people half her age, and funny in a dry, unhurried way, and I liked being around her. I just also drove 40 minutes each way to do it, usually twice a week, while my sister posted airport lounge photos with captions about gratitude. Mom's funeral was the last time I remember all 4 of us being in a room without an agenda. After that, the division of labor sorted itself out fast and never got renegotiated. I picked up the school pickup runs when Grandma's arthritis flared, the pharmacy trips, the Sunday dinners that somehow always ended up at my house because mine was the one with the wheelchair ramp Dad's brother had installed years back for a leg he'd since had fixed. Whitney sent flowers. Grant sent a card with his firm's logo embossed on the corner, which struck me as strange even then, though I didn't say anything about it. My son Milo was 5 that year and used to ask every single Sunday whether Aunt Whitney was coming this time. And every single Sunday I told him maybe, and every single Sunday I was wrong. There'd been one odd moment, almost a year before any of this, that I filed away and mostly forgot. Grant had come to a Sunday dinner with a folder, an actual manila folder, printed forms inside, and set it on the table next to the mashed potatoes like it was nothing. Just something to make everyone's life easier if something ever happens, he'd said, sliding a power of attorney form toward Grandma with a pen already uncapped beside it. Grandma had looked at it for a long moment, smiled the same smile she gave telemarketers, and said she'd think about it, and then asked Whitney to pass the green beans. Grant hadn't brought it up again. I hadn't thought about it again either. Not really. Not until the folder showed up a second time, in a very different form, on a very different afternoon. That afternoon started on Grandma's porch. Whitney and Grant had a 6:40 a.m. flight to a work conference in Denver. Grant's firm was sending him, and Whitney had tacked on 3 extra days for herself. And somewhere in the scramble of packing, they'd decided the tidiest solution to Grandma's post-cataract surgery follow-up appointment that Thursday was to drop her at my place on their way to the airport, without calling me first. I found out when I opened my front door at 6:52 a.m. to find my grandmother sitting on my porch swing in her church coat, a small suitcase at her feet, sipping coffee from a paper cup like she'd been there for exactly as long as she meant to be. "They didn't want to wake you," she said before I could ask. My phone rang 4 minutes later. It was Whitney, breathless background noise of a boarding announcement behind her. I put it on speaker without thinking because my hands were full of Grandma's suitcase. "Hey, quick thing. We dropped Grandma at your place. Her appointment's Thursday. You've got her for the week. Is that okay? We really have to." A laugh. Easy. Already halfway gone. "Honestly, you're just better at this stuff than I am. She's your burden now, okay? Love you. Bye." The line went dead before I could say a single word. Grandma hadn't moved. She was looking at the phone in my hand, the way you'd look at a stranger who'd just confirmed something you already suspected about them. I braced for tears. Grandma didn't cry. She set her coffee cup down on the porch rail next to the dying marigolds, reached into her purse, and pulled out a checkbook I didn't know she still carried. "Drive me to Priya Sundaram's office." she said, before their plane lands in Denver. I asked who that was. Grandma said, my lawyer, in a tone that made it clear this wasn't the first time that sentence had come out of her mouth, just the first time I'd heard it. The receptionist at Sundaram and Locke, attorneys at law, greeted her by name before Grandma had finished giving it. Mrs. Marsh, good morning. Priya's got 20 minutes free. I'll let her know you're here. Not let me check if we have a file for you. Not, have you been in before? My stomach did something slow and unpleasant. I'd assumed we were walking into a stranger's office to draft something reactive, something born in the last hour. The way that receptionist looked up, already reaching for a folder with Grandma's name printed on the tab, told me this office had been expecting her for a while. Priya Sundaram turned out to be a compact woman in her late 40s with reading glasses pushed up into gray-streaked hair and 19 years in trust and elder law behind her, according to the framed bar certificate over her shoulder. She waved us into her office like we were old friends, which it turned out we basically were, to her, if not to me. Eleanor, she said, I take it the trigger happened. It happened, Grandma said, and set her purse on the desk and pulled out a manila folder I'd never seen in my life. It was soft at the corners from handling, thick with paper, and on the tab, in Grandma's own handwriting, someone had written, just in case. I sat down because my legs asked me to. Priya opened the folder and started walking us through it like she'd read it 100 times, because she had. Dated entries going back 3 years, the day Whitney canceled a promised visit 20 minutes before Grandma's actual birthday dinner. The week Grant helpfully suggested Grandma move her checking account under his oversight in case of a fall. A form, dated 11 months earlier, that I recognized immediately, because I'd watched it happen at that exact dinner table. The power of attorney request Grant had slid across the mashed potatoes. Grandma had never signed it. She had apparently photocopied it, dated her refusal in the margin, and filed it. She came to me 2.5 years ago, Priya said, glancing at me, gauging how much of this I already knew, deciding correctly that the answer was none of it. Wanted to understand her options if a caregiving imbalance ever tipped into something like coercion. We built in a discretionary distribution clause in her trust. While she's competent, she can redirect certain assets unilaterally, without needing anyone's sign-off. And about 4 months ago, she asked me to draft an amendment, just in case. It's been sitting ready this whole time. I told myself, sitting in that office chair, that this was probably just Grandma being careful, the way careful people are careful, the insurance policy nobody expects to use. I rationalized it the way you rationalize a smoke alarm going off during cooking, just a precaution, not a plan already in motion. Then Priya slid the amendment across the desk, and Grandma read it once, and signed it in that same tidy, unhurried cursive, and I stopped being able to tell myself that story. The amendment did one specific thing. It moved the lake cabin at Wintergreen, 3 bedrooms, a dock, 41 years of family history, and the property Whitney had been telling people for a decade would obviously come to her, out of the general estate and into an education trust for my kids, Milo and Junie, ages 9 and 6. Effective immediately, not a threat, not a draft. Signed, notarized on the spot by a paralegal named Owen Bricknell, who'd clearly done this exact walk-in notarization for Grandma before, and filed by end of business that day. My stomach dropped in a way I actually felt in my knees. Grandma, I said, you don't have to do this because of one phone call. I'm not doing it because of one phone call, she said. I'm doing it because of a year of them. The phone call just told me I didn't have to wait for a better excuse. I tried weakly to talk her out of at least the timing of it. Give it a week, sleep on it, let tempers cool. She patted my hand the way she used to when I was small and scared of thunder. Sweetheart, I've had a year to sleep on it. That was the first moment I understood, really understood, that I wasn't watching my grandmother react to something. I was watching her finish something. I told myself I should feel triumphant, or at least relieved. And instead, I mostly felt sick. Not because Whitney didn't have it coming, some ugly, honest part of me thought she did, but because the cabin going to Milo and Junie meant my niece and nephew, Whitney's kids, would grow up hearing that their cousins got the lake house and they didn't, and none of it would be their fault. I said as much to Priya on the drive out, standing in the parking lot while Grandma waited in the car. Priya just shrugged, not unkindly. That's a conversation for the family to have later if they want to, she said. My job today was making sure a competent woman's wishes actually survive contact with people who'd rather she not have any. I got back in the car turning that over, and I didn't have an answer for it yet. I wasn't sure I'd have one for a long time. Whitney found out 2 days later, standing in the Denver airport baggage claim, when a certified letter notification hit her email before she'd even left the conference hotel. Priya didn't waste time on soft landings. My phone rang at 9:14 that night. I picked up already knowing from the first syllable of my name that this wasn't going to be a conversation so much as a demolition. What did you do? Whitney said, not a question. She's 81, Dana. 81. You knew she wasn't going to fully understand what she was signing, and you took her straight to a lawyer's office to sign away the cabin, my kid's cabin, into a trust for your kids? Do you have any idea how that looks? I told her, as calmly as 11 years of talking down panicking teenagers let me, that Grandma had made the appointment herself, that the lawyer had known her for 2.5 years, that I hadn't suggested a single word of it. Whitney laughed, short and disbelieving. Sure, a confused old woman just happened to have a lawyer on speed dial the exact morning she got mad at me. She hung up before I could answer. By the next morning, it wasn't just Whitney. It was the family group chat, 16 relatives deep, half of whom I hadn't spoken to since the last funeral funeral, lighting up with a message from my Aunt Carla. Has anyone actually checked on Grandma? This doesn't sound like her. Someone else. Dana's always been the favorite. Makes sense she'd take advantage. My hands were shaking by the third message. I tried calling Grandma to ask if she wanted me to say anything on her behalf. She told me not to bother. Let them talk. They'll have less to say once they've seen the folder. And hung up sounding entirely unbothered, which somehow scared me more than if she'd been upset. I didn't sleep that night. I kept replaying Priya's office, the folder, the dated entries in Grandma's handwriting going back 3 years, trying to figure out how I'd missed a woman quietly building a case file 2 feet from my own front door. The legal escalation came fast, faster than I expected. Within a week, Grant, through a retained attorney of his own, a man named Desmond Achebe, who specialized conveniently in contested trust matters, filed a formal notice threatening to challenge the amendment as the product of undue influence. The letter, which Priya forwarded to me since I was named as a potential witness, used the phrase diminished capacity 4 separate times, and manipulation by a family member with unsupervised access once, which I understood, reading it in my kitchen at 11 p.m., was aimed directly at me. Priya called an emergency meeting. This is the part where it gets procedural, she told Grandma and me, both of us crowded into her office again, this time with Owen Bricknell taking notes at the end of the table. An undue influence claim is hard to win outright, but it's easy to delay with, and delay is its own kind of win for them. To close that door before it opens, I want to request a formal capacity evaluation. Independent, court-recognized, nothing either side controls. If we don't get ahead of it voluntarily, they'll ask a judge to order one anyway, and that version takes months and looks a lot worse in the meantime. There was a wrinkle, and it had teeth. The discretionary distribution clause that let Grandma act unilaterally only worked while she was uncontested and undisputed as competent. If Grant's attorney managed to get a formal challenge on the docket before an independent evaluation cleared her, the amendment could be frozen pending litigation for a year, maybe longer. Priya gave us a window, 12 days to get the evaluation scheduled, completed, and filed before Achebe's office could request an emergency freeze. Owen Bricknell spent that afternoon building what he called, without any apparent irony, the paper wall, a bound copy of every document that could be independently dated and verified without relying on anyone's memory. The notarized amendment itself, the 14-month-old baseline referral from Grandma's primary care doctor, the photocopied and dated power of attorney refusal, 3 years of entries from the just-in-case folder cross-referenced against bank statements and phone records, where they existed. Priya walked me through the logic of it like she was translating a foreign language I badly needed to learn fast. An undue influence claim only works if the story can be told as sudden, she said. Every one of these documents has a date on it that isn't sudden. That's the whole defense. We're not arguing she's right. We're proving she's been consistent. 12 days. I felt that number settle into my chest like a stone. Priya recommended Dr. E. Farah Lindqvist, a geriatric psychiatrist with 22 years evaluating exactly this kind of case. Independent of either side, court recognized enough that a challenge to her findings would be its own uphill fight. Grandma agreed without hesitation, which told me something too. A person hiding something doesn't volunteer for the exam. The evaluation took place on a Tuesday, 2 hours, in a beige office with a window that looked out over a parking garage. I sat in the waiting room the whole time with a magazine I didn't read a single page of, my knee bouncing, my stomach in a tight, low knot that wouldn't loosen no matter how many times I told myself Grandma would be fine. I went over every visit I'd ever had with her in the past year, searching for a moment I might have missed, a confused sentence, a forgotten name, anything that could give Grant's attorney something real to hold on to. I couldn't find one. That should have comforted me. It didn't, not completely, because some small, ugly part of me was afraid of what it would mean about me, about the year I'd spent congratulating myself as the reliable one. If it turned out Grandma had been quietly this capable, this deliberate, the entire time, and I simply hadn't been paying close enough attention to notice, my hands wouldn't stop moving. I texted my husband 3 separate versions of "she'll be fine, right?" and deleted all 3 before sending any of them. Dr. Lindqvist's preliminary summary came back 9 days later, 4 days inside our window. Grandma's cognition tested in the 94th percentile for her age bracket. No findings consistent with dementia, delirium, or any condition that would impair judgment or susceptibility to influence, but it was one line further down the report that actually stopped my breath. Patient reports having sought an informal cognitive baseline assessment through her primary care physician approximately 14 months prior to this evaluation, unprompted and self-initiated, to have on record in case anyone ever tried to say otherwise. 14 months. That was 2 months before the folder in Priya's office even had its earliest dated entry that I'd seen. Grandma hadn't started building a case the week Grant slid a POA form across the mashed potatoes. She'd started before that, watching, deciding, quietly getting her own paper trail in order, long before any of us had done a single thing she was reacting to. She hadn't been improvising for a single day of this. She'd been running a plan longer than I'd been aware there was a plan to run. I called her the night I read that line, sitting in my car in my own driveway because I couldn't make myself go inside yet. "You had a doctor test your memory over a year ago," I said. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't know yet if I'd need it," she said. "I was hoping I wouldn't." "Grandma, what What were you watching for? She was quiet long enough that I thought the call had dropped. I wanted to know which one of them was actually driving, she said finally. Whitney avoiding me? That's just Whitney being Whitney. Tired, busy, not built for this kind of caregiving. I could live with that. But Grant kept bringing me paperwork. Every few months, something new, always dressed up as convenience. I needed to know if my granddaughter was just checked out, or if her husband was steering her towards something. Your sister's call from that airport gate finally told me both things at once, in front of a witness. That's all I was waiting for. 2 days after that call, Grant tried calling Grandma directly. No lawyers on the line, just him. I wasn't there for it, but Grandma told me about it afterward, flat and unbothered, the way she told me most things now. He'd pushed, she said, reminded her how much easier everything would be if this misunderstanding got resolved quietly, family to family, no need to involve more lawyers than necessary. Grandma had let him finish. Then she'd read him the exact date on the power of attorney request he'd handed her at that Sunday dinner, the one she'd photocopied and filed and never signed. He got very quiet, she told me. Then I hung up. I didn't feel the need to say anything else. The mediation session got scheduled for a Saturday, 3 weeks out. Priya's idea meant to head off a formal court date if it could be settled among family with a neutral party in the room. She brought in a retired family court judge, the Honorable Miriam Castellanos, 18 years on the bench before she moved into private mediation, chosen specifically because both attorneys agreed she'd have no patience for theatrics from either side. I almost didn't go. Some part of me, the part that had spent 4 years being the reliable one, the peacekeeper, the person who smoothed things over so nobody had to feel the full weight of what they'd done, wanted to sit this one out and let the lawyers handle it. But Grandma asked me to come, and I realized, sitting with that request, that I was tired of being the person who showed up to absorb the fallout of everyone else's choices, without ever being in the room when the actual reckoning happened. I wanted to see it. I went. Whitney looked smaller in that conference room than I'd ever seen her. No airport lounge polish, just a woman in a blazer she'd clearly bought that week, sitting a careful 2 feet from Grant, who wouldn't quite meet Grandma's eyes. Achebe opened with the same language from his letter: diminished capacity, unsupervised access, a family member exploiting a vulnerable elder for her own children's benefit. And Judge Castellanos let him finish before she said evenly, "Counselor, I've read Dr. Lindqvist's report. 94th percentile isn't diminished. Do you have anything beyond the letter, or was the letter the whole strategy?" Priya laid the rest out herself, plainly, without theater. The 3 years of dated entries in the folder, the declined power of attorney request with Grandma's own handwritten refusal in the margin, the 14-month-old cognitive baseline Grandma had sought entirely on her own before any of this began. Piece by piece, the story Achebe had been building, confused old woman, opportunistic granddaughter, sudden and reactive decision, came apart because every document in front of the judge had a date on it, and every date came before the porch call, not after it. Achebe tried a different angle before he gave up entirely, asked whether it wasn't true that I, specifically, had unsupervised access to Grandma for hours at a time, multiple days a week, more than any other family member. "That's not evidence of manipulation, counselor," Judge Castellanos said, before Priya even had to answer. "By your own client's account, that access existed because everyone else in this room declined it for 4 years running. You can't build undue influence out of someone else's absence." Whitney's head came up at that. For a second, I thought she might actually snap back. Old habit, the two of us trading barbs since we were kids sharing a bathroom, but instead she looked at me, really looked, for the first time since the airport call. "I didn't know it was 4 years, she said, quiet, mostly to me and not to the room. "You never said it like that. You just kept showing up." "I kept showing up because somebody had to," I said, and my voice came out steadier than I expected. "I never asked to be the only one. You just let me be." Nobody in the room said anything for a moment. Grant tried once to reframe the whole thing back toward himself, said he'd only ever wanted to make things easier, that convenience wasn't a crime. Grandma looked at him for a long moment. "You spent a year trying to turn me into paperwork you could carry in your wallet," she said. "And Whitney, you called me a burden from a departure gate in front of a witness you didn't know I had." "I'm neither one. I'm just the only person in this room who was paying attention the whole time everyone assumed I wasn't." Nobody had anything to say to that for a while. I want to say that was the end of it, the mic drop moment, the credits rolling. But Grandma's own rules about tapering off applied here too, whether anyone meant them to or not. 2 weeks after that meeting, Grant's firm opened an internal compliance review of its own after Priya's office, as a matter of procedure, forwarded a copy of the correspondence, including his repeated attempts to obtain financial authority over a client's relative, to his employer's compliance department. It wasn't something Grandma asked for. It was just what happens when you put a wealth manager's name on paperwork requesting power of attorney over an 81-year-old woman who was never his client, and someone with a duty to notices. The amendment was upheld in full. Priya and Achebe hammered out a settlement rather than let it drag into a real courtroom. The cabin stayed in the education trust for Milo and Junie, untouched. Whitney and Grant would receive a reduced conditional distribution from the rest of the estate down the line, 30% less than the original terms, tied specifically to a documented number of hours of actual hands-on caregiving for Grandma between now and whenever that distribution came due. 200 hours, logged in a notebook Grandma kept on her kitchen counter and signed off in her own hand hand week by week. Not a punishment, Priya told them, in language careful enough that I believed she meant it. A chance to become, on paper and in practice, the thing they'd been claiming to already be. Grant's compliance review, separately, concluded 3 weeks later with a formal written warning in his file, and a note that his firm would no longer permit him to solicit financial authority from relatives of existing clients. A policy, his supervisor told him, that technically already existed and that he technically should have known. Whitney and Grandma didn't repair anything that day. They didn't hug it out in the parking lot, didn't cry, didn't have the tidy reconciliation I half expected out of some instinct I'd absorbed from every family movie I'd ever half watched. Whitney signed the settlement with her jaw tight, said a short, formal okay to her grandmother, and left. Grandma watched her go without any particular expression on her face at all. Not smug, not sad, just done. A year later, almost to the week, I pulled into Grandma's driveway on a Tuesday afternoon to find Whitney's car already parked in front of the house. Through the kitchen window, I could see her kneeling by the porch rail, sleeves pushed up, replacing the soil in that same chipped clay pot that had been killing marigolds since before I was born. Grandma standing over her with a watering can, directing with the particular, unhurried authority of a woman who has never once needed to raise her voice to be obeyed. Whitney had logged 181 of her 200 hours by then, according to the notebook on the counter. I'd checked, out of a habit I hadn't quite managed to break. Nobody had made her keep coming past the minimum some weeks required. She just kept showing up, on schedule, without being asked twice, and Grant's name hadn't appeared in that notebook even once. I didn't go in right away. I stood by my car for a minute, watching my sister get dirt under her fingernails for a woman she used to call a burden from an airport gate, and I let myself feel something that wasn't quite forgiveness and wasn't quite vindication either. Something steadier than both and a lot slower to arrive. Grandma caught sight of me over Whitney's shoulder and didn't wave, didn't call out. She just tipped the watering can a little further, like she had all the time in the world and had always known I'd get there eventually. Then Pepper spotted me through the window and started barking like it was breaking news, and I went inside.